All right. So I guess I'll do that again. Welcome everybody to the Municipal Energy and Sustainability Managers Training Academy. This is Solar 101. My name is Julie Curdy and I'm the director of our Clean Energy Department, and I'll just kick off today's training. Next slide, please. So today's lesson is focused on how do municipal energy managers get started on doing solar in their community. So we're going to learn about how solar PV systems work. Our presenters will describe some of the key policies, programs, and incentives in Massachusetts that support municipal solar projects. And we'll talk about the differences between a direct purchase of a solar system for a municipality versus a power purchase agreement, or PPA. On our next slide, we have an introductory poll just to get a sense of where everybody is at on solar systems. So that will pop up for you. And if you just want to pick your answer to, I can explain how solar photovoltaic systems work, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And then the second question is, I understand the difference between direct purchase and power purchase agreements, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And I understand the key Massachusetts policies, programs, and incentives that support municipal solar projects, from strongly agree to strongly disagree. All right, we'll give it just about 10 more seconds for people to fill out. Okay. So just sharing the poll results here, it looks like we have an audience that's pretty familiar with how solar photovoltaic systems work, most in the agree to strongly agree. So we'll just cover that content pretty briefly at the start. And then some understanding, which is good, of power purchase agreements. And again, we'll cover that in greater detail as well. And then it looks like the focus on policies, programs, and incentives will be especially valuable, with a lot of people being neutral or disagree on that one. All right. So on our next slide, we have our speakers that we just want to introduce briefly for everybody. So our first speaker today will be Jeremy Koo. He's the Assistant Director of MAPC's Clean Energy Department, and in this role he leads projects for municipalities to develop and implement clean energy and climate plans, policies, and programs. And he previously worked at Cadmus, leading projects with utilities and state and local governments on beneficial building electrification and decarbonization. Our second speaker will be Chad Laurent, Esquire. He's a principal at Cadmus with over 20 years of experience supporting clients on clean energy, energy efficiency, and decarbonization. He helps policymakers, executives, and community leaders drive forward energy, climate policies, programs, and projects, and just has a lot of passion for solar, so we're so excited to see him here today. Kobe Frangillo is the Deputy Director of Renewable and Alternative Energy at the Department of Energy Resources, or DOER. Kobe also has hands-on local government experience, having previously served as town councilor for the town of Franklin, Massachusetts for 5 years, so may be able to offer some insight there as well. And then finally, Pamela Hill is a lead specialist in National Grid's Customer Energy Integration Department. She has 19 years of experience supporting clean energy development and brings expertise in resolving post-interconnection issues and a strong understanding of how utility processes impact municipal and community-based solar projects. So will be an excellent person to know in this process with your municipalities. So those are brief introductions of the speakers. We'll jump into each speaker and go through their portion of the presentation, and we will capture questions in the chat while the speakers are presenting. On the next slide, we have the agenda. I can just go over that really quick. So we'll have a Solar 101 that Jeremy will cover on solar technologies. We'll cover how to get started, an overview of solar policies and incentives. We'll cover how municipalities can pay for solar, direct purchase versus PPA, and then we'll save ample time for Q&A at the end as well and cover next steps. And again, if you have any questions during the presentations, please pop those in the chat. We will monitor that and make sure that we pull those forward during the Q&A. And also, Samiksha put in a request for folks to please introduce yourself in the chat as well for the benefit of the speakers here so they know what municipalities are here and what roles you have. So if you could add your name, your title, and the municipality that you work with or the organization you work with in the chat, that would be great for the speakers as well. So without further ado, I think we'll jump right in to Jeremy to cover Solar 101, an introduction to solar PV. Thanks, Jeremy.
Great, thanks so much. Good morning, everyone. I've been asked to just sort of give the sort of the basics to make sure the sort of subsequent speakers talking about policies and programs and purchasing options and financing and such, have the foundation to make sure we're all on the same page. Next slide, please. So yeah, I'll just be talking about, what is solar PV, what are the components of the system, and give an initial introduction to some of the types of solar PV systems and applications that we commonly see for at municipalities. Next slide. Um, oh, I guess the animations didn't translate. It's going to be a quick quiz, but two different presidents put solar on the White House. They're and over about 35 years apart. Uh, Solar has come a long way since Jimmy Carter put the first panels on the White House. President Obama then also put panels on in 2014. The solar we used to be pushing around in the 70s and 80s was primarily solar thermal, used to sort of take direct sunlight and convert it into heat for use. And now we're pretty much when we talk about solar, we're only talking about solar photovoltaics or PV. You usually see it abbreviated as such, where we're using solar energy to generate electricity through the photovoltaic effect. Next slide. So, typically how this process works is you take your solar energy source, the solar cells and panels and modules, convert that energy into DC electricity. That electricity then has to be inverted from DC direct current to AC alternating current so that it is usable by our appliances, export to the grid. And that electricity at that point can either be, stored for later use through battery storage or used on site or distributed back to through the grid to the electric utility. Next slide. Uh, Text might be a little small, but starting with the basics of this, the solar PV, basically there is a in between the glass layer, of the solar cell, the first, the kind of first unit of this whole process. There's sort of a semiconductor layer. Usually it's silicon base. I think over 95% of solar cells, that semiconductor layer is silicon. Um, when it's exposed to sunlight, that solar energy is transferred to the electrons that are flowing through this PV cell, and that um, generates the current and the direct current electricity. Um, when you have a solar panel, it is composed of many of these individual cells. Sometimes those panels, modules, sometimes they're used a little bit more interchangeably. But hundreds of cells form a panel, and then anywhere from a few to hundreds or thousands of those panels, form a PV array or system that is then you install that at a particular site. Next slide. Again, as I mentioned, technically, I believe there are some more experimental systems that are able to create AC electricity within the module without a separate inverter. But the next key component of a solar system is that inverter because we have to convert it from the DC that's generated into AC so that we can use it for on-site electrical loads or to be exported to the grid. Um, this does create some inefficiencies. Inverters are not 100% efficient. Technically, the most efficient ones are something like 99.7% efficient, but that's typically not what you see installed in the field, just given the cost of those inverters. And, usually you'll see somewhere between 90 to 95% um, for the efficient for the types of inverters that we see installed. Um, there are really two types of inverters. One of them you can see sort of above is what's called a string inverter, where you take a bunch of panels together and basically wire them together on a string, and all of their output goes through that single inverter. This is going to be the most common inverter for larger systems, just given the cost considerations, and it does come with the one of the issues of it is that if for example part of a string of panels gets shaded by a cloud or something to that effect, the output of all of those panels on the string is affected. Um, there are also microinverters. These are getting more common on residential systems, but instead of having several panels that are connected to a single inverter, a microinverter is connected to individual panels output. If you have heard folks talk about on their rooftop systems, they can see the output of each individual panel. That's because they have a microinverter and they can thus see the get data from each of those individually. So it has that benefit of being able to uh, have each panel be converted into AC electricity individually and be able to sort of see the live performance of each panel. Um, but they are more expensive. So typically you'll see string inverters for the larger projects that are typically installed in municipalities. The inverter is usually one of the first things that needs replacement with the PV system. A PV system, will typically work for 25 to 30 plus years, where with some slight degradation in performance annually, usually about 0.5% per year. Um, the inverter typically needs replacement at around the halfway point in the lifetime of the PV systems. Microinverters typically can expect to be more like 20-25 years, so maybe more in line with the panels themselves. So it's just a consideration when you're thinking about capital planning for installing a PV system, is that the inverter replacement is something that is worth budgeting for from the outset, or at least planning on needing, by somewhere around year 10. Next slide. And then, we have to figure out what's the best way to, mount the solar panels at whatever site you're considering at the best possible angle for solar generation. And that's going to be primarily the racking that we're talking about. Most racking is fixed. Just from a price perspective, one of the things with solar PV is that, like, you can get more efficient panels, you can get more efficient generation, but often, the cost premium for more efficiency, if you have the choice instead of installing more panels, tends to favor more panels that are less efficient or less optimal than trying to get the most out of every single panel. That depends on your site, though. Of course, if you're more constrained in the amount of space you have, and you are trying to maximize the generation, then optimizing may make more sense. So most racking is fixed, but sometimes there are projects that can track on an axis so that it follows the sun over the course of the day, and that'll improve performance over the course of the day. Next slide. And then there's metering. Is an important component just to track the generation, and also how it impacts on-site consumption in some cases. Typically, we're talking about two types of meters, or the meters in combination. A single direction meter, like the meters that you typically will have on a home or a building really only tracks the electricity usage in one direction. This is common for projects that are designed just to export to the grid, where there's no on-site usage. But I believe that it's also required to have one of these meters for smart so that you can record the generation and thus get compensated for it. A bidirectional meter is going to be common when you're installing a project on a site with a that is where you're trying to offset offsite consumption so that you want to measure electricity flow in both directions, and so very common for net metered systems. Next slide. So the three types of systems that you'll see most commonly for municipalities are going to be roof-mounted systems. Typically, these are the ones that are going on municipal buildings. I think on average they tend to be around for public facilities tend to be at around 250 kilowatts in capacity. Here's a good example of one in a school in Cambridge. Ground-mounted systems are significantly larger typically. I think on average, they're very common on landfills or other sites. This one's on a Superfund site in Acton, and those I think the average municipal landfill project in Smart is something like 1.7 megawatts to that or something to that effect. And then there are solar canopies, which are installed over parking lots, and typically, the project is more in the range of around 350 kilowatts is around the average. Um, all of these are things to consider for municipalities to sort of make the most of what public spaces that they have available. Next slide. And just briefly want to talk about some of the configurations, terminology you might hear, behind the meter or front of the meter are pretty common terms that are thrown around with PV systems. Behind the meter means that, the system is operating behind your electric meter, and so the generation is offsetting on-site usage. And most municipal projects are installed behind the meter because you're reducing usage on site, whether it's at a school or other municipal building. If you're putting, 250 kilowatts of PV on a high school, it's probably, there's probably not a whole lot extra that's coming off of it, and it's all being used on site. And often, the generation that you're able to offset on site is more valuable than it is to generate and export. That being said, there are, behind the meter projects do have the option to have excess generation that is exported to the grid, either credited, and Pamela will talk more about that, or you can transfer those credits to other municipal sites. If you have too much generation at one, municipal site, you could send it to another municipal account. Front of meter projects, there is no on-site piece, but again, there is still the option, as with something like community shared solar, where that generation can still be credited virtually to another account. And the community shared solar system is an example of that, where you have this project is standalone, but the credits that are being generated from excess generation is being credited to individual customers. And last slide. Um, just one more thing. Keeping your watts and your watt hours straight. When we talk about watts, we are talking about, that it's typically like see it as like nameplate capacity. We're talking about the amount of power that this system is delivering under peak conditions. That is when you see that watt, it's sort of it is basically, in the rest in often in the rest of the world they refer to it as watt peak, the W and P. It's not very common to say so in the US, but that's basically like you have perfect sun exposure, you're getting that amount of wattage. Most of the time, that is not happening in Massachusetts, and so it's not a direct comparison to say, like, 1,000 watts of solar is going to offset 1,000 watts of demand because of building electrical demand, because that you're rarely at those peak conditions because of shading, weather, angle of the sun, things like that. You will also see, watt DC versus watt AC, and that's basically a reflection of, watt DC is like what is the capacity of the panels. Watt AC is, what is the peak wattage being generated after it's been inverted. So watt AC is always going to be a smaller amount. And so folks sometimes don't label whether it's DC or AC, and it can be sometimes worth understanding, what that is, because sometimes the inverter is actually reducing that capacity by quite a bit. And then when we talk about the cost of PV systems, you're typically going to hear it in terms of cost per watt of capacity. And then watt hours is the electricity that's actually generated by that PV system. And watts and watt hours, of course, are important to you and your capacity as an energy manager, whether you're looking at the demand of a building for demand charges or total electricity used for when you're billed for watt hours. But we're keeping the terminology straight here. And just typically in Massachusetts conditions, if you have 1 kilowatt of PV that's at a good site, you'll usually get about 1,200 or 1,300 kilowatt hours per year generated by that. And that's it. I'll pass it on to Chad.
Thanks, Jeremy. All right. So where do you start? So now you're interested in solar. You just understand the technology. Where do we begin? I think you can get probably 2 slides forward. Great. So there's a lot of different reasons to go solar. You could support your climate efforts. Installing solar results in less need for fossil fuel generated electricity, which reduces emissions and helps the Commonwealth meet its carbon reduction goals. It helps create local jobs in that solar has to be installed by relatively local installers. You can't ship a building somewhere else to have the solar installed and then have it shipped back. So you need people nearby. It also saves money. So most of the reason that municipalities are installing solar is that it helps to save on electricity costs, which then those savings can be used to fund other initiatives within cities by lowering your electric bill. So how do you get started? So first, think about what the goals and priorities are in terms of going solar. You want to quantify your current and future electricity usage at the site, but also across the municipality as a whole. Determine who's going to be working on the project, overseeing the project, what staff and resources are needed, both internal and external. Identify the different stakeholders that need to be engaged with, community leaders, nonprofits, other folks that across the community who might be impacted by the solar PV system that you're looking to install. And then finally, choose a procurement pathway. These projects need to be put out to bid in some form. And so deciding on which procurement pathway you're going to use. So those are the things to sort of think about when you're interested in going solar in your city or town. Next slide. In terms of general timeline, probably a year to 2 years is what it would take from when you have your initial idea for putting solar on a building or a parking lot or some other location, and to when it's finally generating electricity. So give yourself a couple of months to identify different sites, run the economics and the analysis of whether and which sites to include in a procurement. Then developing and distributing a request for proposals, another couple of months to get those responses and evaluate and select an installer, another couple of months to negotiate and sign the various contracts associated with that, whether it's a construction contract or a power purchase agreement / net metering credit agreement, and then 6 to 9 months to install a project after that. And we've seen different supply chain delays due to COVID a few years ago, and also just in terms of different tariffs and expiring tax credits. So some of those timelines can be pushed out just depending on availability of equipment and costs of different supplies. But generally, that's something to keep in mind. In terms of forming your team, making sure you think about who will oversee the project. In a little bit, I'll talk about the different ownership models that are available, who can help develop the RFP and negotiate sort of internal and external legal support, who is going to engage with stakeholders. Usually we have sustainability staff or energy manager staff that are leading these efforts across municipalities, but you also need to engage with the facility managers at the different sites, first responders who may or may not be familiar with solar and might have concerns about if there's a fire at the building, finance and legal departments engaged. So making sure that everybody sort of understands within the community that you're thinking about solar and making sure that they're engaged early. And then sometimes it could be worth hiring an outside consultant, sometimes referred to as an owner's agent, to help manage and run the process and be available to answer questions throughout. Next slide. So next, you want to assess the economics and the ownership options. So estimating the project costs and returns. So what size system would you be looking to install at different locations? If you're going to own and operate the system, what that upfront cost is and where that money would have to come from. Again, looking at the electricity usage at each site and each building and what rate structure you are on with your utility. Is it a commercial, what commercial load and what demand charges are on those electric bills so that you can evaluate how much energy you're saving? There's different tools. I didn't update this. It's instead of the National Renewable Energy Lab or NREL, it's the National Lab of the Rockies now. But they have a couple of tools that are free that you can use to run that analysis and put different inputs in to determine what a system is going to generate for you. You want to evaluate state incentives and different net metering rules, which my panelists are going to talk, my fellow panelists are going to talk about next. And then selecting an ownership model, which I'll talk about later. So next slide. Stakeholder engagement is really important. So you want to look at which sites do you want to include? And when you think about that, do you have solar on existing sites? If you put out a procurement for sites previously, where there's some sites that weren't developed at the time and you're revisiting those, or how are the current solar PV systems that might be installed in the community, how are those performing? Do you want to revisit some locations previously? How visible are the systems? Is it sort of going to be a showcase to the community where you want folks to be able to see that the solar is installed here? Equity impacts, just thinking about like where the system is located. Are you utilizing a brownfield site or other locations that are underdeveloped? Or is it going to be highly visible for some parts of the community and not others? Is it going to be near like public spaces or parks? While solar is a fairly benign technology, there are still myths and misconceptions out there. So it doesn't hurt to think about those in advance. Solar does not create any noise, but folks think that it might. Glare sometimes comes up with a concern, but the panels are designed to absorb sunlight, not to reflect it. So glare is also not an issue. Folks have complained about leaching of toxic chemicals, which is also a myth. Recycling of panels. Panels are available to be recycled at the end of their life, but as Jeremy mentioned, the panels are warranted typically for 25 years and can last much longer than that. So it is not a looming crisis of solar panels that would be all sent to landfills, and most manufacturers have active recycling programs to take back the panels. They're made of glass and sand and aluminum for the most part. Sometimes I still hear a myth of like energy payback and that the panels don't generate enough electricity that it took to manufacture them, which is also completely false. And a solar panel will generate more electricity than it took to manufacture it within a couple of months. Canopies. Some people really like solar canopies because they can shade the cars below them. They can prevent weather from affecting the cars that are parked under them. They can provide shade, but some people just don't like the way that they look. And so in communities, we've seen pushback at times for against solar canopies. And then trees. So you want the panels to be unshaded. And occasionally we've had communities that are looking to clear a plot of land. And that might involve cutting down trees to put a solar panel there. There's typically a lot of pushback if that's proposed. But even if there are some trees that have maybe grown up around the border of a property, even if those trees are non-native trees and just sort of grew there on their own, sometimes it's best to cut some of those down and plant other trees in other locations but anytime you're cutting down trees, folks tend to get upset about that in communities, so something to be aware of in advance. Next slide. So finally, or next, thinking about evaluating solar potential at different sites. So are you looking at rooftops? Are there spaces on the ground that are either near facilities within the community? So this could be a wastewater treatment facility, it could be a capped landfill. There are typically a lot of parking lots available that are unshaded in communities, so canopies are becoming more and more attractive. Those systems can be more expensive, but again, there are other benefits from the shading that those canopy systems provide. And if you already have a parking lot, you may as well sort of utilize that space for something other than just parking cars. And you can also combine those projects and canopies projects with electric vehicle charging infrastructure below them. So I know as a condition of some of the state grants that are available to communities, pairing that with EV charging is something that you can do. There's a couple of tools available that are linked. I believe the slides will be shared here. Rocky Mountain Institute has a municipal solar site selection tool. NREL's PV Watts helps with that. And then Google, if you look at Project Sunroof, there's also the ability to look at a location and get an estimate of how much solar could be generated at that site under ideal conditions. Make sure that you have data for these locations, so detailed site plans. Look at how old the roof is. If the roof needs to be replaced within 5 years, probably want to wait to replace that roof and then put the solar on top rather than have the solar be installed and then have to replace the roof 5 years later. So you want to look for roofs that are not likely to be replaced in 10 or plus years before you're putting the solar on top. And in many times it can be difficult to find records of when that roof was replaced or what the current warranty is or who the manufacturer was. So there is a lot of data that should be collected so you know what you're getting into, and then including that in the procurement so that the solar installer can accurately price what they think the system is going to cost and whether that has to include roof replacement or otherwise. And then finally, it's really important to look at electricity usage and electricity rates so that you can evaluate what exactly the potential is to save on those different electric accounts that the system is tied to. Next slide. And so let's see. I think this is the last slide in this section. Yep. So next, just thinking about running the procurement process, and this could obviously be its own presentation, but you want to coordinate with your procurement office in terms of which procurement pathway to use to select an installer, and then making sure that the request for proposals that goes out is clear in terms of everything that you're asking for, and making sure that you're giving enough time to evaluate those proposals, and then look to award the contract. And then just as a reminder that whole process can be about 12 to 24 months. All right, I think on to the next presenter. Pamela, over to you.
Good morning, my name is Pam. I work at National Grid in the solar department. I'm just going to talk a bit this morning about solar credits.
And Pam, you're coming through a little bit quiet. I'm not sure if it's possible to be a little louder.
Sure, let me check my microphone. Is that better?
Yes.
I'm just going to lean really close to the laptop.
Thank you.
Cities and towns across the state of Massachusetts can utilize net metering credits to reduce energy expenses and support long-term sustainability goals. And their full value is best realized through accurate and effective management. Okay. So how do solar credits impact your billing? You can either participate in net metering or in the Mass Smart program, where you'd receive alternative on-bill credits. These credits are generated when the solar array produces energy. The energy is exported to the grid and then converted into bill credits. These bill credits can either offset future electric charges offset on-site load, or you can transfer them to other accounts to cover the electric charges on other utility accounts. Municipalities can participate in solar in a few different ways. They can own solar arrays. Municipality can also serve as the host customer for an array that's owned by a third-party developer. And lastly, they can act as an off-taker through participation in community solar. So public entities do have a net metering cap of 10 megawatts. The maximum amount allowed for municipalities or other government entities is 10 megawatts in aggregation. And that is tracked on the Mass ACA site, which I linked here. Being an off-taker of community solar does not count toward this net metering cap. So community solar participation, municipalities participate, a lot of municipalities participate in community solar. And how that works is that the credits are received from the host facility, and that host facility will bill the municipality monthly for the credits that they receive. And that host customer is also responsible for managing the credit allocations. So if you are receiving credits from a community solar, they would submit the allocation sheet that tells us the percentage where to transfer those credits. And the credits, they deliver the most value when they're accurately allocated, managed, and correctly applied to utility accounts. Credits are transferred via either a Schedule Z or an AOBC allocation sheet. The host customer is responsible for submitting that. So if you are the host customer, if the municipality owns the solar or is the host customer, you can submit that Schedule Z. Credits are transferred based on percentages, not dollar amounts. So those forms would define what percentage you want to transfer, and it directs where you want to transfer those credits. Those forms can be updated 6 times per year. The Schedule Z just has a few more guardrails than an AOBC, where public net metered systems can transfer credits only to other public entities, and they need to be within the same load zone. Net metering credits can't be cashed out. The Schedule Z form, it's pretty long. I think it's probably 7 pages now. We do have a step-by-step guide how to complete that, but if you are struggling with a Schedule Z at any point, we are also happy to help with that. And lastly, National Grid is working on an automated submission system. So eventually you'll be able to put your allocation sheets into a system, and you'll get immediate feedback on those accounts, their status and eligibility. So that'll streamline the process a bit. So a lot of municipalities are experiencing an accumulated credit, experiencing excess net metering credits for a few different reasons. The allocation management sometimes can be part of the problem, and changes in load profiles. When you do energy efficiency improvements to decrease your load, you may have too many credits going to those accounts. You may have reduced facility usage. And also in Massachusetts, you have the choice to choose your supplier, and those competitive suppliers can either bill you separately outside of your National Grid invoice, or National Grid can bill on their behalf. So if you receive your supply bill outside of National Grid, then your net metering credits, may not be applied to the supply portion of your bill. So there's some short-term solution. We did receive special permission from the DPU to allow one-time transfers for municipalities. So we have worked with quite a few municipalities allocating credits that have accumulated on one account and spreading them out amongst other accounts. But the long-term solution for accumulated credits is definitely allocation management. And again, you can update those allocation sheets 6 times a year. So if you have allocations and you're accumulating credits on one of your accounts, then you're able to change those allocations multiple times per year to try to balance that out better. So additionally, you can use your net metering credits that have accumulated to pay for energy efficiency projects that are eligible for on-bill refinancing. The on-bill refinancing occurs directly on your National Grid bill, so any net metering credits that have accumulated would be applied to offset those charges. And if you're interested in learning more about energy efficiency projects, you could reach out to your community manager or your energy efficiency rep, and they can help you determine which projects are eligible for that on-bill refinancing. I believe this is my last slide. This is just a few additional resources. National Grid has a platform called My Business Account. This is a great tool. It centralizes all your bills in one place. It also can provide some visibility into credit transfers. So if you, as a municipality, are receiving credits from multiple community solar hosts, that credit might show up on your monthly bill as a lump sum, but that lump sum could be, from 5 different community solar hosts. So My Business Account would actually provide the breakdown to show you the individual transfers from each community solar, so you can validate that they are invoicing you correctly and that you're getting the credits that you are being billed for from them. I also included a link to our Solar Hub, which can help you understand your bill a little bit more if you have questions. And the last link is just for additional information on net metering.
Please bear with us as we refresh our slide deck. It didn't update naturally.
Would you like me to be pulling up my own slides? Would that be helpful?
Would that be more helpful?
I think, why don't we do that? Go, Kobe, if you want to go for it.
You can if you want to. I've also found them there. They're afterwards, right where they should have been. So I can pull them up if you want. Either way is good.
Either works. Mine seems to be delayed anyway, so if you could pull them up, that'd be great. While they're being pulled up, I can start to introduce. So again, thanks for having me and letting me join. My name is Kobe. I'm the Deputy Director of the Renewable and Alternative Energy Division at the Department of Energy Resources. And I'm going to talk through some of the state solar incentive programs, but really we're going to be talking about the primary solar incentive program, which has already been mentioned a couple times, and that's the SMART program. You can go to the next slide. Just a quick view of what we're going to do. We're going to talk about SMART as a whole, and we're going to talk about the newly formed SMART 3.0, which is just underway right now. We're kind of in our first full program year in 2026. And then we're going to talk about a couple other incentive programs, net metering, the one that we just talked about being the primary other form of compensation. These are dense slides, and happy to provide them if they're not already being provided after, because we're going to move fairly quickly through them and then be able to jump back and answer questions as we go. We can go to the next slide. And the next slide. Okay, so what is SMART? SMART stands for the Solar Massachusetts Renewable Target Program. It was launched in 2018 and is the Commonwealth's primary solar incentive program. It's administered by both us and the electric distribution companies, or EDCs, and the tariffs and the costs are reviewed and approved by DPU. There's some DPU oversight. It's eligible. It applies to projects, either residential, commercial, or utility, up to 5 megawatts, with actually some exceptions for those larger projects like brownfields. And projects they receive both a base compensation rate and can receive adders, additional compensation for specific, either being sited in specific areas or for serving specific off-takers. And we're gonna talk a little bit more about how this works on the side, but you can see that there's a full base compensation rate. We subtract out the value of energy, and then we provide that SMART incentive payment, SIP, and that's what you're actually paid per kilowatt hour for generation. Next slide. Really quickly by the numbers. Been here since 2018, and so I've generated a lot of projects, both in number and in capacity, and a whole bunch of solar plus storage as well. Next slide. A real quick note here, all of the SMART costs are recovered through a distributed solar charge, which comes up on all ratepayer bill. So it's funded by ratepayers, and thus is only eligible for municipalities that are served by the electric distribution companies. Next slide. A real quick note on why we're setting up SMART 3.0. So previously, SMART had a declining block model, meaning that there was a set compensation rate, and as the program got filled, it was on a set downward trajectory in how much incentive would be provided. And that was based on the assumption that solar costs would go down over time, and they didn't. Interconnection costs went up, labor costs went up, general inflation, but certainly some global impacts on the cost of goods, the steel, the PV panels, the inverters. And so essentially SMART compensation had zeroed out, and we knew that we needed a new program to match a flexible market needs. Next slide. And so that brought us to SMART 3.0. This was developed starting in the winter of 2023, all of 2024. We did a whole bunch of stakeholdering. We knew that we had to improve the finances of the program, but we also knew that there was an opportunity to improve program outcomes, and so we wanted to take a full chance to redesign the program. The program officially launched last October, so we had a brief program year 2025, and now we're in our first full program year 2026. Again, a couple of the goals: we were looking to be more responsive to changing market conditions, but we also wanted to improve transparency, consumer protections. We wanted to balance cost-effective deployment with land protection needs and our environmental priorities, and we wanted to better track projects and ensure compliance. The major changes are in these buckets, and we're going to talk a little bit more about all of them. The major change is to the structure, where we now have an annual assessment process to set the incentive rates on an annual basis. We also had some pretty major tweaks to our land use policy, including setting up a mitigation fee framework that we'll talk about. And then we wanted better outcomes in terms of actually serving low-income customers. So we've enhanced our incentives, expanded eligibility pathways, as well as improved compliance and minimum discounts for low-income residents. Okay, this is the major structural change. So again, now we have an annual assessment period, and this is going to continue to happen in a loop where the program year starts in January 1st. And while a program year is open for applications, we are already assessing next year's rates needs. And so we've hired a consultant who does a survey of local developers. We work with the National Laboratory of the Rockies to conduct an economic analysis. We post our annual rates, draft annual rates in October. We have a public comment period, and then we finalize those rates on December 1st to then apply to projects in the following program year. In addition to considering the economic needs of a project, we're also considering local land use and environmental protection goals, impacts to ratepayers, and participation rates across our different adders and considerations. A quick review of what is included in that annual assessment. All of these are up to annual adjustment. So the capacity block for any given year, program year 2026, that's 600 megawatts, only applied to projects under 250 kilowatts. We set the set-asides for different project types. We set the allocation across the EDCs. We set the base compensation rates across different project sizes, and we set the adder rates on an annual basis. A quick look at what those compensation rates are this year. I say 2026 up top. These are the 2026 numbers, so apologies for the 2025 in the table. But again, different rates, somewhat lower rates, the larger the project is. And newly in Smart 3.0, we just have flat incentive rates for under 25 kilowatt projects. So residential projects are just going to receive a flat incentive rate, and they don't have the value of energy subtracted out of them. And a quick review of what those adders are. So a whole bunch of different project types that you can receive additional compensation for. You can stack a location adder with an off-taker adder. You just can't double up within an adder type. We've increased a lot of these adders to encourage siting on the built environment. We've also added 2 new adders, the large building mounted adder for particularly large roofs, and a raised racking adder also for roofs that have HVAC systems and need additional raised racking as opposed to just being set on the roof. One of the other key projects that I'll point out here is community shared solar. We'll talk about that in a second, but that's up to 7 cents per kilowatt hour of additional compensation. And there are particular ways that those projects can be applied to municipal services. On the process, again, we've talked about this. This is projects can apply starting on January 1st. In that first 10 days, they'll be sequenced in the order that we receive, and the rest is going to be on a rolling basis. And if all of the capacity happens to be reserved, which we haven't come close to yet, then we would hold a wait list, and they'd be put at the top of the following program year application period. All of the projects, so you apply within a given program year and receive that base compensation rate, and then you hold that reservation period for 2 years. Okay, I'm going to talk about just a couple key aspects of the Smart 3 program that may be of note to municipalities. One is changes to the land use. So there are certain places that are entirely ineligible to receive SMART incentives. Those include the biomap core habitats. They newly include the top 20% of forest carbon areas. You can't have more than 10% overlap with those dense old growth forests, and then other applicable protected lands. Also newly, any large ground-mounted project will have on-site visitation from an environmental monitor to ensure best practices are being followed. And the additional major land use piece is we now have a mitigation fee. So a large ground-mounted project will be scored across each of these aspects, and based on their score, will be asked to pay a fee to offset their environmental impact, again, scaled to the amount of environmental impact that they're having. All of those fees will go into a state fund to complete mitigation work. Okay, I said that community shared solar would be relevant. Some of the changes to community solar, so we used to have both a community solar and a low-income community solar. We no longer do. We combine them and now say that all community solar projects must enroll a minimum of 40% low-income customers or 50% low-income customers at no cost to those customers. They can still have anchor off-puts. And then a key one for our municipal energy managers is these alternative community shared solar projects. So you're going to hear more about utility projects that are actually being run by the utilities and automatically subscribe low-income customers to offset part of their bills. But the other one is you can combine a community shared solar project with your municipal aggregation program to enroll 100% low-income customers and provide a further discount off of their municipal aggregation rate. All residents participating in community shared solar program will have to receive a 20% discount, and all low-income residents will have to receive a 40% bill discount. That's fine. Yeah, if you could go back just one sec. Maybe. Great. We talked about some other changed equity programs, and I just wanted to point out that we have expanded the low-income adder to make it easier for both facilities and low-income residents themselves to participate. So if people have questions about participating, it's easier than ever to be considered a low-income resident or low-income household and receive additional incentives. And we have added consumer protections for any third-party owned systems. If you hear about poor experiences in the market with door-to-door salesmen and bad contracts, we're doing our best to improve consumer protections around some of those contracts. Great. Okay, and I just wanted to go through a couple examples because it all can be kind of complex. So anytime we're talking about a base compensation rate, that is the all-in what we think your project of that size needs to be economical, and that's what we're setting on an annual rate. But there are ways that you're already receiving some value of energy to make up for what is needed to make your project economical. And so we subtract out that value of energy and pay you the remaining solar incentive payment. So one of these examples is a 5 megawatt ground mounted community shared solar project with a battery. So they're receiving additional 7 cents for being community shared solar. They're receiving an additional adder for having that storage. Their all-in compensation rate is 29 cents. And then this project is front of the meter. It's feeding directly into the grid. So it's receiving alternative on-bill credits equivalent to about 15 cents, which is going to be subtracted, and that solar incentive payment is going to be about 14 cents. And you can see in your total compensation package, both the total value that you'd be receiving for that size project, as well as the actual direct incentive payment that you'd be receiving. And another one, this would be a public entity project. So they're a behind the meter canopy project owned by a school. They're receiving an adder for being a canopy. They're receiving an adder for serving a public entity. That combines to a total of 36 cents. They're subtracting out, in this case, they're behind the meter, so they're subtracting out their net metering compensation of about 28 cents and creating a final solar incentive payment of close to 9 cents. And just as a reminder, that solar incentive payment can either be applied directly to your electric bill, or you could receive a check directly from your EDC. Okay, and then quickly wanted to talk. So SMART is the main solar incentive program in the Commonwealth, but there are other ways that we're compensating solar. And I just wanted to touch upon a couple of those at a high level. Not all are going to be directly applicable to public entities. If you go to the next slide, we can talk through some of these. So the Low Income Services Solar Program, this is a grant program for nonprofits serving low-income residents in the Commonwealth. We have a couple leading by example grant programs for solar on state-owned facilities in your community. There's a residential energy tax credit that your residents can take advantage of, as well as sales tax exemptions and property tax exemptions. Projects don't have to participate in the SMART program. They could choose to participate in the open renewable portfolio standard market and just sell their credits themselves. So if you participate in SMART, the EDCs, the utilities, retain those renewable energy credits, which they apply to their meeting of their renewable portfolio standard minimum requirements on an annual basis. But you, as a individual property owner, could just choose to participate directly in the renewable portfolio standard yourself, with just a more variable compensation rate for your renewable energy credits. And we've already talked about net metering and the direct on-bill credits that you receive from net metering. A couple others that aren't directly incentivizing solar but are worth noting: if you're a green community, you're eligible for energy technical assistance grants, META, under Municipal Energy Technical Assistance, Green Communities grants. And if you happen to be a climate leader community, you can receive up to $150,000 in support for clean energy project assessments and engineering design. Those are all of the Commonwealth's solar incentive programs. Happy to answer questions. I think I'm the last one, so we might be opening up.
Sorry, we have one final closing segment from Chad.
Great.
How to pay for solar. So if people want to grab their questions in the chat, which I see you did, Sherdeal, so if others have questions, pop them in there, so we can circle back to them right after Chad rounds us out talking about direct ownership or PPAs.
Sounds good. Next slide. So this is just a quick note about renewable energy certificates, which Kobe covered. But if you are looking to offset your Scope 2 emissions as part of greenhouse gas accounting, you may have to retain ownership of a renewable energy certificate if you're following those greenhouse gas accounting protocols. And so that just could influence your decision as to whether or not you are participating in the SMART program, or if you are deciding to retire the RECs, the renewable energy certificates, on your own, or if you're not participating in SMART, selling them into the renewable portfolio standard market. So I won't get into all of those nuances and details, but just wanted to bring that up, and glad that Kobe touched on that. Next slide. So how do you pay for solar? So one way is to own and operate the system yourself. And so that would be, you would need to find the cash within the municipality, either through bond or municipal budget processes, or sometimes if you are doing renovations or building a new property, you would incorporate the cost of solar into that new building or that new property, which again would be funded through bonding or other mechanisms that municipalities would utilize to through their budgeting process to pay for it. But you would need to come up with the money up front, and then you would recognize the savings that would pay for the system over time. And so paybacks can be relatively quick for a system that is paid for upfront, somewhere in the 6 to 10 year range, depending on the project. Hesitate to throw out numbers because there can be a huge variability in project costs, but those are not sort of unreasonable things to think about in terms of payback. But not that that's necessarily the right way to measure the economics of a system. It's more like return on investment, or how much money are you going to save over the source of the system, the lifetime of the system. Thing to remember if you are owning and operating the system is that you would then be in charge of making sure that the system is monitoring the system, that it's generating the electricity that it should, and then in charge of operation and maintenance costs, either hiring a third party to do that, or making sure that your staff has the ability to monitor the system, get contractors out to swap out inverters, or if somebody inadvertently shuts it off during building maintenance, that somebody is checking the accounts to make sure that the system is generating over time when it should be. So those are things to solar, once you put it up, it kind of just sits there and generates electricity. However, you do need to check and make sure that it's doing that over time, and somebody needs to be monitoring the performance of that system. And so if you are owning the system, just making sure that someone within the municipality is in charge of that. Next slide. The next is power purchase agreements or PPAs. These are also referred to as alternative on-bill credit agreements or net metering credit agreements. And basically, a third party takes the tax incentive. They pay for the system upfront. They're in charge of all the permitting, operations, and maintenance. They own the system over the life of that system. Usually, it's a 20-year agreement between the solar installer and the municipality. And then, as Kobe was describing, the municipality decides which electric bills which within the community get assigned the credits that solar PV system is generating. Those credits, just as an example, would have a value of, say, 17 cents on the electric bill. And then you would get a separate bill from the solar installer for some percentage of that 17 cents. So maybe they could offer, depending on the site, a 4 to 8 cent discount off of those credits. So you get a credit for 17 cents on your electric bill, and then you pay the solar installer 13 cents, then saving 4 cents off of your electric bill. And so that is sort of the way that third-party ownership model works, is that the municipality doesn't have to come up with the money upfront to build the system. Instead, the third-party solar installer does that. And also a third party then has all of the incentive to monitor and make sure that system is operating, because they don't get paid by the municipality, and then unless the municipality sees those credits show up on their bill. Next slide. So this just sort of is somewhat of a visualization of the commercial solar customer would be the municipality. They pay the third-party solar installer a payment based on the credits they receive on their electric bill. Next slide. So what are the sort of the opportunities and the risks? So the project owner, in this case, the solar installer, they take the tax credit, any state tax deductions, depreciation, they take the smart incentive, and then they get the contract revenue, the either alternative on-bill credit, net metering credit, or PPA, just depending on how it's termed. They get that revenue from the municipality, who agrees to pay them a certain amount per every credit that appears on the bill. It's low cost, long term. It is sort of well known what the discount would be, and there's often performance guarantees embedded in those agreements as well, or at least there should be. And it's a fairly easy procurement pathway through 25A procurements within the Commonwealth to select a third party. The risks, the solar installer is taking on the risks of changing incentives. Customer default risk is low. Municipalities don't go out of business. They take on the performance risk. So the municipality, again, is if the system isn't performing and the bill credits aren't showing up on your bill, then you don't typically owe anything to the solar installer. And then the installer is in charge of all the permitting and development and interconnection on all those costs that are then embedded in the net metering credit rate that is applied to the municipality. And then, that if you don't have the money up front, then third-party ownership is a way to go. The main difference is that if you were to own and operate the system itself, you would receive sort of greater savings, because you as a municipality would be taking advantage of all of the incentives yourself, and so all of those incentive values and performance values go back to the municipality directly, and so you're receiving a greater share of those rather than sharing them with a third party. But you would have to come up with that cost upfront. So that's sort of the main difference between self-owned or third-party owned systems. Next slide. So here's just a couple of examples. This one from Lexington, Massachusetts. They're proposing a 294 kilowatt system and a 500 kW battery. It's going to cost them about $1.5 million for the system, but they're expecting to receive significant savings, take advantage of the SMART incentive. And this is a sort of a rendering of what the Canopy project would look like. So they decided that they were going to own the system, finance the system themselves, and receive all of those incentives and savings going back to the community. Next slide. This is one that I personally worked with the city of Newton. This is a third-party owned model. This is a almost 500 kilowatt system that costs about $2.2 million a year, and they're saving about $74,000 a year from the system. And they allocated some of those credits to low-income residents on low-income resident electric bills, as well as using that to offset the cost of the electric bills at the DPW lot. And this is kind of a unique system in that it's really high up off of the ground in order to allow the sort of larger equipment and trucks that are using the DPW space. I think it's like something like 30 or 40 feet up off the ground at the DPW lot in Newton. So kind of a cool project. And another case study here is a solar canopy at the Winchester Elementary School, and thanks to MAPC for sending these along. This is, again, almost just under 400 kW. We see systems sort of go under that 400 kW, under 500. If you're 500 or larger, you need to include battery storage. So sometimes systems costs just come in under that if you don't want to have to pay extra for a battery. This system costs about $2.2 million. The tax credit, which was available at the time, defrayed a significant amount of that cost as nonprofits or non-taxpayer entities were able to take advantage of the ITC, or they still are through July 4th of next year. And they're estimating savings about $725,000 a year over the 25 years. And here's just an example on the right of how they sort of break down some of those costs. So again, you could, by going solar, the main sort of benefit is saving money on your electric bills, as well as all of the other economic and job creation opportunities. So I think that's all I had in terms of slides, and happy to help answer some questions.
Thanks so much to all of the presenters